Hey guys, my name is Matsumiyo, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I'll give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you'd like to submit your own question that can be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. The first question for that comes from G-Turned, and it is, Ubisoft has earned $440 million through Rainbow Six Siege alone in 2018. What are your thoughts about this? Well, first of all, this is pretty impressive, and I gotta congratulate Ubisoft. They were able to take the game from what it was at release to where we are today, which is pretty phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying that Rainbow Six Siege was bad at release. I played it, I loved it, I thought it was amazing, but it did have to overcome a lot of challenges. Not just the bugs and glitches. I think people over-exaggerate how bad it was back then, but really, they just had to overcome the challenge of getting people involved with the game to begin with. A lot of people just simply didn't know about Rainbow Six Siege or were hesitant to get involved. When it launched, it had around 11,000 concurrent players on Steam. Now, I understand this doesn't take Uplay numbers at all into consideration, or of course console, but now today they're up to 120,000 concurrent players just on Steam alone. So that's pretty amazing. The second big takeaway that I got from this is that this is a great example of being able to be successful without having to sell power. This has kind of been the standard of the industry forever. We look over at EA with the Battlefield series and their premium service, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Call of Duty and their map packs. They have their own problems. Now, I understand why they did it for the longest time. Microtransactions weren't as big of a thing back then, but it's kind of showing the new direction of things where as long as you support the game, you provide worthy content over the years with, of course, new operators, new maps that are all for free, people are willing to stay around, stick around, play your game, and they're also willing to buy and fund the further development of the game through these microtransactions. Now, I'm not saying that Rainbow Six Siege is perfect in this regard. They've been adding more and more, and some of them are starting to get a little absurd, but just in general, I think that this is a really good illustration that as long as you support the game in a meaningful way and you provide meaningful and great content that's for free, people are going to stick around. The final big takeaway that I got from this, though, is that Siege is no longer the underdog, and hopefully they're acting accordingly. When you have a small development team that isn't bringing in a lot of revenue, it makes sense when bugs and glitches pop up. It's not an excuse, they need to eventually solve them, but it's a bit more understandable. Rainbow Six Siege no longer has that excuse. They're a juggernaut at this point. And while I fully realize that you can't just simply throw money at the problem, you're not able to hire a bunch of developers and just call it good, but I am hoping that they are making those kinds of investments. And so all in all, once again, this is honestly really impressive. To see where Rainbow Six Siege started to where it is today is pretty phenomenal. But I'm also hoping that this means that they are making more investments in this game so that we get more quality, polished content in the future. The next question comes from Matthew, and it is, what do you think about a Russian offensive operator where her special ability is a low-strength explosive drone? It's designed primarily to take out hatches and walls, nearly identical to an impact nade, but much lower damage done to the operator, like 5 or 10 damage. Russian during the drone phase, pop a hatch before it's able to be reinforced, and blow open a wall for epic flanks. So normally I'm not usually on board with this idea because I never really liked the concept of having a drone that could deal damage or splash damage like this against enemy operators. But because you addressed this where it would only deal like 5 to 10, that makes it much more bearable. And so with that in mind, this gadget could have a lot of interesting applications. Like you mentioned in your question, if you were able to get to a hatch before it was reinforced, that would provide a ridiculous amount of benefit to your team. Especially with the addition of Kaed, you wouldn't need to bring a Thatcher to deal with an electrified hatch anymore. You wouldn't even really need to bring an Habana on some maps if you were able to get your drone to that hatch before they could reinforce it. That's the thing though, you need to get there before they reinforce it. How many times have you started the droning phase where your drone spawns on the opposite side of the map where the objective is? It takes you a good 30 seconds to get there. If it's gonna take you that long, at that point, they're gonna have all those hatches reinforced, especially if they know that this operator is in the game. And so while yes, in some situations, if your drone spawns really close to where the action is, you can sneak on in and take it out. But I feel like the vast majority of the time, especially in the droning phase where people are watching out for this, it's going to be difficult to get that sneakily into where you want it to go and then take out the hatch. I just don't think it's going to be really all that feasible. Now, if that strategy doesn't work, it doesn't mean that the drone is now useless at that point. You could still open up a soft wall, and that could also be very beneficial. You drone on in, identify where they're located, make your way on over to a soft wall, open it up really quickly, and then rush on in and take everyone out. That could be really satisfying. But the thing is, though, is that do you really want to be using one of your drones to open up a hole? Like, there's a lot of great operators in Rainbow Six Siege that can drone, switching over to their gadget like Ash, for example, and then open up a hole. You don't need to sacrifice one of your drones. Drones are one of the most important tools in your arsenal for the offensive team. The information that you get is incredibly valuable, and to have to use that to open up a wall, especially since there are a lot of other operators that will just do that better, doesn't really seem like it provide that much of a benefit. Now, you could argue that they could give us 2 normal drones and then this special gadget, or like 1 or 2 of them, but then the thing is do we really want to have someone that has 3 or 4 drones that could be roaming around the map? I have a feeling that if this was the way that they did it, that this person really wouldn't be used the way that you think they would, opening up walls, but would really just be an information gatherer. Having 4 drones scattered around would be incredibly valuable. And so all in all, while I fully understand that this is a very popular operator idea, it's for these very reasons why I just don't think that it would be a good place for Rainbow Six Siege. But of course, as you guys all know, that is just my 2 cents. The next question comes from Cody, and it is, do you think that making the game ricochet damage in Siege would fix the troll TK problem? So this question comes up a lot, and I'm assuming what you mean by ricochet damage is that if you take a couple of shots at your teammate, let's say you do 50 damage, then you yourself take 50 damage. And so if you want to TK at the beginning, then you're basically going to take yourself out as well. And so in theory, this would result in people not wanting to do that action because they're taking themselves out of the game. The whole idea of trolling is to make someone else's experience awful, but not your own. And so if you basically do the same thing to yourself, in theory, you're more likely to not do that. And while this might have a positive impact on the game in regard to TK, I don't really necessarily know if this would be something that would be good for Rainbow Six Siege. How many times during the droning phase you're on defense where you shoot a teammate? You did it on accident. These things happen. You're not doing it on purpose, but you've now done 50 damage to your Valkyrie, for example. Well, now, if this new system was in place, you also have 50 damage done to you. That is going to put your team at a massive disadvantage. And so instead of just having one person that is low on HP, you now have 2 people because this system was in place to try to solve this other issue. Just the other day I was playing where an enemy rounded the corner, I took them out, but the last second my teammate ran in front of my shot and I accidentally took them out. They didn't do it on purpose, it was on accident. They were trying to move from point A to point B. They weren't expecting the frost to peek their head out, but at the end of the day, I dropped them and I got the TK. Now imagine that you yourself are now taken out because of said accident. And so instead of it just being an awkward situation where you took out your teammate but also the enemy, now your team is down 2 people, which is going to put you at a massive disadvantage. You could even make it worse where maybe your teammate ran in front of you before you were able to line up the shot, and now you're down 2 people without actually taking out that player. And so it's because of this very reason, I just don't think it has any place in Rainbow Six Siege. I fully understand where you're coming from. I do think that Ubisoft needs to do more about the TK problem. It feels like we're constantly answering questions about TKing in Sunday Mailbox. Clearly, this is an important issue for the Siege community, but I just don't think that this is the best way of going about it. The next question comes from The Appointed, and it is, what about an alibi buff where if a teammate stands over top one of the clones, they/she could scan/reprogram the clone to the teammate's appearance? Well, obviously, this would be a really big upgrade. The biggest downside of her gadget is that they're fairly obvious, and so if you were able to make it look like anyone on the defensive side, that is going to play some serious mind games. Now, that said, though, I don't really know if this is necessary. I think Alibi is in a decent place right now. Maybe if they wanted to make it where if you're crouched and you throw her gadget, then the Alibi is crouched, I feel like that would maybe be a compromise here, but I don't think they need to go this far. Alibi actually requires some skill and some thought to use, and once you actually do start to understand how to use her properly, she can be a force to be reckoned with. I've seen some Alibis pull off some really impressive plays by manipulating the information and using their gadgets in really creative ways. And so I realized that she's not the most popular operator in Rainbow Six Siege. I do think that she's in a good place right now, and I think if they made this adjustment, that would be pushing things too far. I don't think that she'd all of a sudden become overpowered, but she would definitely be a lot more annoying. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's episode of Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. As always, if you'd like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you could also leave a comment or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. But until next time, guys, have a good one and take it easy.